name is Matt. I am your host. We bring on real experts to discuss topics that matter to you. I call the show Don't Listen to Me because you shouldn't listen to me, but you should definitely listen to all of my guests because I bring on some good ones here. I'm excited to bring the show to you. I'm excited to have Brian Howard with me here today. But before we get into that conversation, if you're watching on Facebook Live right now, you can leave comments. You can comment in the comment section. And if they're good comments, we'll do our best to answer your questions. If they're terrible comments, we'll probably just ignore them and pretend like we didn't see them. But feel free to comment away if you want. Also, if you're watching later, this will be on YouTube. You can watch there. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all of those places where you absorb media. It'll be in all of those places. So make sure you check us out there. Like I said, I've got Brian Howard as my guest today. Brian, impressive resume, my friend. Looking over it here. Brian's the founder and CEO of Context Coaching and Pastor Guide, over 27 years of leadership experience as an executive and organizational coach and leadership coach, working with high-level leaders from around the world, background in organizational leadership. He's started nonprofits as well as for-profits businesses. Brian's also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Got that right?
Pretty much. So I was a corpsman, Navy corpsman, which is like a paramedic, stationed with the Marine Corps. So with the Marine Corps, corpsman, technically in the Navy, but you get a lot of respect from the Marines when you're a corpsman. So I was with the Marine Corps Battalion in Desert Storm.
Fair enough. I knew there was something funky in there. I didn't want to get that wrong. So yeah. I'll have people messaging me all this stuff I get wrong anyways. But so Brian, you're married to your wife, Chandra, 4 kids, right?
26 years of marriage, 4 kids, 15, 17, 19, 21.
Dude, is everybody at home right now?
We're all sequestered at home. I think we're on like week 7 or 8. So it's been since March the 14th. So it's been a while.
Dude, how's that going?
We're at a good stage of life because our kids are, we don't have little kids. So it's going pretty well, so everybody's healthy. We're tired of being at home like everybody else is. We'd love to go eat at a restaurant at some point and go to the store, but we're doing what we got to do right now. So
you're a sushi guy, right?
Yeah. We haven't had sushi now. And I mean, we're making homemade pasta and we're making homemade pizzas and all kinds of fun stuff, but no sushi in like 7 weeks now.
Dude, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Man. Well, anyways, I've invited Brian on to share some of his story, dive into a topic that he is, in my opinion, and many others, an expert on, and that is the topic of leadership, particularly leadership in a time of crisis. He has coached me personally, so you can know that. And so he's walked through countless crises with other leaders and helped lead. And so I've brought him on today to just share some wisdom with us. This is free flowing, Brian. We hang out. This is like having a beer, hanging out. So if it gets serious, it gets serious. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm open for whatever. But
here we go.
Yeah, man, let's do it. So Brian, why don't you fill people in? Most people watching probably know who you are, know a little bit about you, but a lot of people don't. So who are you? What do you do now? Share a little bit of your story.
Yeah, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. My family was all from the Los Angeles area, but we ended up in Tucson when I was in middle school. So middle school, high school, Tucson, Arizona. Did a stint at University of Arizona and eventually ended up moving to California, joined the military after I moved to California. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life at that point, but moved back to California where our roots were and joined the military. Went to boot camp, all that sort of stuff, and then ended up, I was a little bored on the Navy side. And if you're a medic on the Navy side, you can switch to the Marine Corps side. So that's what I did back in like 1990. So I did a bunch of Marine Corps training and then Desert Storm began. And so on Christmas Eve, 1990, I got on an airplane. And words you seldom hear on an airplane, please stow your weapons under your seats. That's what we did. We flew over to Desert Storm. I spent 9 months over in the Desert Storm. Was disabled while I was over there. Was in a bad truck accident. Anyways, all that to say, came back, went to college, went to seminary, served in church ministry for a lot of years, planted a church that grew to be a fairly large church, started several businesses along the way. have been coaching leaders for the last 20 years or so. And so here I find myself now, 49 years old, married for 26 years. I now live in Orange County, California, so 60 miles south of LA or so.
Okay.
So to this day, I'm acting executive director of Acts 29. I've been serving with Acts 29 for a lot of years, and I still run several companies and still coach several leaders. So that's kind of where I am in terms of journey. That's the super fast version, right? But that gives you the overview, anyways.
Right on, man. No, that's good. That's a lot packed into 49 years, man. That's a lot going on. Man, I was actually curious. I was trying to, do some research beforehand, and I really couldn't figure out. I was like, what is Brian's title in Acts 29 today? Because I feel like you've had them all now. And so you're working your way through the ranks.
Yeah, I've been chairman of the board. I've been vice president of the United States. I've been U.S. West director. I've been chief custodian. I've never been the worship leader, but essentially, I've stepped into leading in the Acts 29 world right now, in the absence of a top leader. And our board is currently working through what the future is of Acts 29. I still serve on the board at this point. So right now, I'm in kind of this interim acting role in Acts 29 to help guide us through this time. And eventually there will be permanent leadership in Acts 29. So yep, it's a title change, but that's happened a few times before.
Gotcha. Man, it's a lot. Well, we got a bunch of people hopping on, so I just want to reiterate, talking to Brian about leadership, particularly leadership in crisis today. If you do have questions, feel free to throw them in the comment section. Like I said, we'll try our best to get to them. No guarantees there, but if you've got some questions, throw them in the comments. Say, hey, Chris Reg is saying hello. He's being active in there, so how you doing, Chris? All right, well, let's dive into some of our topics here. You've been coaching guys for a long time. You've been leading stuff for a long time. Well, do you have a working definition of leadership that you use? Because I hear so many other ones, and I think that kind of can set the table a little bit for what we're talking about is a good definition for leadership. Do you have one?
Boy, my first and probably earliest shaping influence on leadership, other than, growing up under a solid father figure, my dad was solid, still married to my mom to this day, over 50 years. But
awesome.
My first, in terms of as an adult, leadership shaping experience was with John Maxwell. Now, I didn't know John Maxwell personally, still don't, but I read a number of his works in my 20s, and I'll never forget John Maxwell saying, leadership is influence. Essentially, that's how John Maxwell defined leadership. And when I read his book, Developing the Leader Within You, Developing the Leaders Around You, essentially leadership is influence. And perhaps you've heard the quote before, or the saying before, if you think you're leading people, you turn around and nobody's following you, you're just taking a walk, right? And so,
yeah.
I would say leadership is having a passionate vision and then building a team around that vision that becomes a collaborative vision. So when I give you, I would say and I've said this publicly quite a few times before, I would say there's different leadership philosophies, 3 that come to mind. One would be, I'm the leader. All of you around me exist to serve what I think needs to be done. All right. Okay. So Jim Collins calls that what's he call it? The genius with 1,000 helpers, or the artist with no hands. A second leadership philosophy would be something more like, I'm the leader. I'm going to take advice from you, and then I will make the final decision. All right. Now, I'm not saying that is a flawed or bad. I would say the first leadership model is flawed. The second leadership model, I wouldn't necessarily say is flawed, but the third leadership model would be, I am a leader, or I am the leader. And so I will build a team around me of people that are better than me at the things that they do. And then I will function more like an orchestra conductor, or a baseball manager, or a head coach on a team where people essentially are more effective than me in the areas that they're leading. Now, what you can't do is you can't have, 50 people all leading in different directions. So a leader, or sometimes a team of leaders, needs to be shaping a vision for where we're headed. But then I would say real leadership involves pretty intensive collaboration rather than the genius with 1,000 helpers. But just a pure, I think of leadership, I think of influence, developing people, and vision.
Hmm.
So that's just a brief overview to say that's the kind of, and over the course, I've coached hundreds and hundreds, probably over 1,000 leaders at this point. And the best leaders are not people that see the people that work under them or around them as people to just get stuff done through, but people to be developed, people to collaborate with, people that will lead with me. But I would definitely say, I've read a lot of Peter Drucker. I'm not a fan of pure collaborative leadership where 9 of us get together with a whiteboard and nobody actually is in charge. I do think leadership, there is a sense where leadership involves decision making and having a person in charge and that sort of thing. But I would just, in those 3 models, I gravitate toward the third model, but because I'm not threatened by others around me, and because I believe that's the best way to lead when you can build and develop talented people around you.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for that. I was thinking while you're talking, it's a fascinating thing, the idea of that kind of collaborative leadership nature where a good leader is somebody who's willing to say, these are the things that I'm good at, these are the things I'm not good at, and I'm going to bring people onto this team that are better at things than me. Do you think that sounds intimidating to some leaders out there to go, I'm going to hire people that are better at things than me?
Oh, yeah. In fact, you have got to be, and a lot of leaders are insecure. In fact, I want to say most, but I don't know that. I don't know that factually, but
Probably.
it may be, yeah. Many leaders are insecure. And if you're insecure, if you think you know best, it's going to be difficult for you to have people that are better than you on your team. I've worked under leaders before that I think I outgrew their leadership. And, I've also worked, and they felt threatened and insecure about that. I've also worked under leaders before who I outgrew their leadership, and they didn't feel threatened or insecure at all. They felt more like, wow, this is great. I'm glad to have a person on my team who's, I don't mean I outgrew their leadership in everything, but say in a particular area. So I would say, yeah, it's intimidating for a lot of leaders to have people that are better than you in the areas that you lead. But if you, let's say in the business world, for example, in the business world, you don't want a director of marketing who is worse at marketing than you are. You want a director of marketing that's better at marketing than you are, or you're hiring the wrong person. So if you have 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever people underneath you, and you're better than all of them, then you've got 50 assistants. I think, and you act. I'm the artist. I'm the artist with no hands. You're the painter. But it takes a secure leader. But a good leader is going to acknowledge that and realize I'm going to be limited in the kind of people around me if I don't allow a person to grow. Now, I look at a guy like Pastor Larry Osborne, and I know Larry's a friend, in the North San Diego area. Yeah. I look at Larry and I think there's a leader, pastors a church of like 10 or 11,000 people, who's not threatened. He took his key guys around him. At least my understanding is from spending quite a bit of time with Larry. He took his key guys around him and he put them in roles where he basically said, you guys are top leaders alongside me. I'm not threatened. But it takes a secure leader to do that.
Yeah. What are some other traits as we're kind of fleshing out this leadership thing? What are some traits of a great leader, like as you're talking about? So being secure is obviously one. We just talked about that. What are some other traits? So, because if you're watching and somebody's like, well, I want to be a great leader, that means you're probably going to have to cultivate some stuff in your life to become a great leader. Nobody's just born with it. It is developed, unless you tell me I'm wrong. But yeah.
All right, I'm going to do this kind of off the top of my head and give you a few here. The first would be, let's reiterate what I just said. The first would be a person who's secure in his own skin. All right. The second would be a person who is self-aware. All right. So I'm self-aware enough to know my own strengths and weaknesses and to acknowledge where I'm not good. I think the third thing is a person, and this is I don't have a list of 20, but I'm giving you a few that I think are key here. I think a third thing would be a person who listens to wise voices around him or her. Okay, so and a person who doesn't always think that they know best. Fourth, I'll go the person that thinks of himself or herself more as an orchestra conductor. And I'm using that because we always use sports analogies, but most of us can picture an orchestra. You got
Well,
an
we don't have any
orchestra.
sports right now, so
You don't have
that,
any sports, but we don't have any orchestra either, probably.
that's
But I
true.
don't
That's
know.
true. Yeah.
But
Anyways, go.
the orchestra conductor may not be the best violin player, but the orchestra conductor makes sure that everybody plays together. The head football coach in the NFL might be 100 pounds overweight and might have a heart attack if he runs down the field, but he knows how to take these 50 players on an NFL team that are better than him at the position they play. So I would think, orchestra conductor sort of coach. And then number 5, I'm listing these to keep them straight in my head. I would say a person who invests in others. All right. So a person who invests in and develops others. The best leaders invest in and develop others. All right. Military, marriage, business, church. So when you think of those things, you think of secure, I'm trying to remember them all now, self-aware, a person who listens to the people around them, a person who sees himself or herself more as an orchestra conductor rather than as the best at everything.
Yep.
And then a person who invests in and develops others. I'm going to give you one more. And a lot of us have read perhaps the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, the whole concept of a person who works on the organization, not only in the organization. So the best leaders are not technicians.
Yeah.
All right. So if you think of a barbershop, the technician cuts hair, the manager, makes sure, oversees all the other barbers, make sure the products get ordered, make sure that the sign gets turned from closed to open, doors get locked, that sort of things, floors get swept. What's the owner doing? Now, the owner might do some technician work, might cut some hair, but the owner's trying to figure out how to get more business for the barbershop, how to open another barbershop. So I would say number 6 in my quick list here would be a good leader is working on the organization that he or she leads and is devoting substantial time. Like there's a CEO in Denver that I coach, very successful, large organization, all day Tuesday. He does nothing but work on his company. He's a CEO of a major company. He does no meetings. I do a call with him Tuesday morning, and then all day Tuesday, he works on the company. So that's what I would say is number 6. I could probably go on, but for the sake of time, we'll hold it to 6 right there.
No, that's good. I like that a lot, and I'll try to write all those up and share them on the post later. So if people are wondering if they are like looking for a piece of paper, something to grab that goodness down, I'll work on getting that out there to everybody. Let me ask you a question. I'm just kind of riffing off what you just said. The difference between being in it versus on it. I think most leaders have heard that. So if you're coaching somebody and they need to be the leader and they need to be on the business more, they need to be on their church more, they need to be like not so much in it. What are some steps that you would recommend for them to take to kind of be able to develop that ability to be on it a little bit more instead of in it all the time?
Well, okay. The first thing that I would say to do is I would say you need a block of time in your schedule every week. That's just, in your calendar, it's called vision time. It's called work on the organization, whatever you want to call it. But you have a block of time where you have no meetings. And that needs to be, when I coach a leader, I say that needs to be a minimum of 4 hours once a week. And it should be a morning time block, if at all possible. Because, the whole think in the morning, talk in the afternoon, there have been lots of studies around that. And so step 1 would be put a time block in your calendar that just says vision time or work on the church or work on the business or work on the organization. So, and then come to a place and close your door and turn your phone on do not disturb and spend a few hours. And you might say, what do I do during that time? So that's the second thing is I would spend the very first time just brainstorming what kinds of things do I need to do to work on the organization. So you start asking yourself questions like, where do we need to go next? What does our organization look like in a year? Have we visited why we exist and what our core values are lately? Is it clear how we measure success in our organization? What problems do we have that we're currently facing that we haven't addressed? The classic sort of SWOT analysis. That would be an exercise of working on the organization. What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses and opportunities and threats? What kind of territory do we need to take next? What ground do we need to cover next? How is our staffing culture? How's our staffing culture? How is our overall culture? what do we need to improve in our overall culture? See, what you're doing is you're not making sales calls, you're not doing counseling, you're not working in the organization. You're thinking more, how can I work on this to make the organization better? Now, oftentimes a leader will say to me, hey, I've got this time block. I've got Tuesday mornings, 8 to 12. What do I do in that time? And what I'll say, I just had this conversation with a leader this morning. What I will say is I'll say, take the first couple hours and brainstorm. What are all the questions you need to ask about the company? And then bring that back to me and let's talk about it. So the kinds of, I just gave you just off the top of my head, 10 or 12 things you could do during that time. The idea is that I'm not dealing, that Steve Covey's whole first things first paradigm, where he talks about urgent and important. And he says the important is seldom urgent. For example, working out is not urgent. Eating well is not urgent. I could eat a whole bag of Doritos today and it's not going to kill me. But if I eat a bag of Doritos, every day for lunch, it's probably not going to be good long term. So the most important things in life are often important. Investing in my kids. If I don't do that today, no big cost. If I don't do it for 20 years, I don't have a relationship with my kids. So what I'm essentially doing is I'm saying, by working on the business, I'm working on what is important. I'm looking up at my shelf up here. One of the books that I really like is Gino Wickman's book, Traction, where he talks about building a whole plan for where your organization is headed. So when I say work on the organization or on the business or on the church, I'm getting out of the nitty gritty and I'm stepping back and going, what do we need to do to improve, fix, grow, take new ground? So step one, put a time block in place. Step two, do that kind of stuff during your time block.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you actually had me do that, and it's in my calendar now. It's funny, and this is we'll use this as a bit of a segue, but I've noticed, I have a very regimented calendar, and I got to be honest, it took me almost a year to actually do it. Where I had everything listed out, like this is my vision work time, this is my communications time, this is my meeting slots, like all that kind of. I like you told me, I think almost 2 years ago, and it took me a year to actually go really implement it. And now, I got super dialed in on it, and that's how I do it now. It's all segmented out. Well, then all of a sudden, a global pandemic hits, right? And so there are times we have to kind of throw it out a little bit. Or am I wrong in that? How is somebody who's I'm used to having a very regimented schedule, and I feel like as a leader right now, I have no schedule anymore. It's just everything changes every minute, it seems.
You remember the quote by Mike Tyson? Everybody's heard this quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yeah. So here's the thing about a plan. You could think in an almost fatalistic way and say, why even make a plan? Why even make a schedule? Why even have keep a set of priorities? Why even set goals? We have no idea what's going to happen anyways. Here's what I would say. I think when we look at wisdom from the Bible, when we look at wisdom from business authors that we read, we clearly know the value of planning. All right. So planning is wise and good, and we should plan, but we also have to hold that plan in somewhat of an open hand, in the sense of nobody ever wrote a plan and kept it 100%. Yeah. All right. So I tell leaders, man, if you keep that plan 75 or 80%, 85%, that's good. People that keep their plan 100% probably are a little too rigid. Now, in this COVID-19 thing right now, these are crazy times. I mean, we're still working, but everything's really, really, really different. And so, I know people that, everybody I know, life has been upended. So right now you're probably writing a new plan. And right now, I just decided I can only do 5 Zoom meetings a day. 5 a day is all I can do, because I was doing 8, 9, 10, after looking at Zoom for 49 hours a day. And so, man, you definitely plan, but hold that in a loose enough hand that you're not so rigid that if you only keep it 95%, you beat yourself up.
Yeah, no, that's good, because I think right now you just kind of go, when stuff changes so fast, I think that's a great leadership characteristic, right? Adaptability, being able to bend and flex a little bit, but not break, and remain some level of continuity. Actually, an early on call a Zoom call, speaking of Zoom, that I was on with you and a bunch of other pastors in Acts 29, I thought it was helpful. You shared, you're like, hey, you need to make a plan for the next 3 months, right? Like you need to at least have an idea of where you're going. I found that helpful. And then I was listening to Craig Groeschel on his leadership podcast. He was talking about the leader needs to be able to plan for the short term, but think long term. That's where we need to be right now. Because so I was glad he expounded, because he said the reason why is because I'm so tired of being disappointed. If I think in the short term, like, hey, I'm going to get to have my church meet in 2 weeks, or my business is going to be open again, and it doesn't happen, that disappointment will wear on you. And so, those are things that have been kind of guiding me through a little bit. So thanks for sharing to do the 3-month plan thing. That was super helpful for us here.
Good. Yeah, right on.
Other question I have for you is this: there's a quote that I read a while ago, and I think it's great for leadership now. I'd love to hear you kind of talk about it, but it's leaders don't motivate through crisis, they lead. What does that mean when you hear that? Like, because I'm a motivational guy, I'm a bit of a coach. I want to get in front of my people and kind of rah them to death, but I don't think people want hype right now. What do you think people need from leaders?
Yeah, that's interesting. Before now, I haven't heard that leaders don't motivate through crisis, they lead. So I'd have to reflect on that. But I think off the top of my head, I think I would say leaders are made during crises. If you think of movies that you've seen, where somebody stepped up into leadership, when we think historically, people that we have seen step up into leadership during a crisis, leaders lead. Now, what does it mean to lead during this time? Boy, I think there are several things that we could say. I think it means to be present relationally during this time. I don't mean just like, I've written several blog posts and done some coaching and some podcasts around what it looks like to lead during this time right now. And I think right now there's a real human element where we have got to lead people and engage with people relationally. I think we have to keep people focused during this time on what is real versus what is emotion. So just because I feel something doesn't make it reality. I've talked to leaders who will say, "Man, I just feel like everything's falling apart. I feel like I'm a victim. I feel like different things like that." And, I took a leader recently to, in the Bible, Psalm 42, where everything's falling apart around the author. And he basically says, hey, there's a few points here. First of all, this isn't only you. So that's what's true. It's not only you. This is common. God's not out of control during this time, so talk to God about it. Talk to yourself. I mean, the famous Bible scholar, Martin Lloyd-Jones, and pastor said, a lot of our problems in life, or most of our problems in life, are because we let ourselves talk to us rather than talking to ourselves. And so I think a leader needs to tell people the truth right now and encourage people to focus on what is true. I think a leader needs to be able to give people a longer term vision, because right now it feels like we've been at home forever, but we've been at home for 7 weeks. And Peter Drucker, what you just, when you quoted Craig Groeschel, Peter Drucker in his book, The Effective Executive, answers that question as well. He says, look, when there's a short-term crisis, do we take our minds off the long term? And he says, no. We keep the fire extinguisher in our hand, right? You still have to act in the short term, but you never take your mind off the long term. And I've been coaching leaders right now to be thinking short term, mid-term, long term, because I think those are the three. Like, short term is where we are right now. And, Matt, we're already 7 weeks into the short term here. The short term is the crisis. It's what Andy Crouch calls the blizzard. Midterm is what the next 6 months is going to look like. It's probably, or maybe longer. It's going to be a modified in between reopening, but who knows what that looks like. And long term is going to be a final reemergence. And I think leaders need to be leading in all three of those levels right now.
No, that's really good. Yeah, thanks for that. 'Cause, I mean, that was a question I was going to ask, and you totally answered it for me, is what do leaders need to be doing right now? Right? Like, what are the things? And that's right on. So are there any leaders out there that you're just kind of watching right now that you're like, man, I'm really blown away with this lady or this guy or this group or organization, that you're like, man, in the midst of this, they seem to be, doing a good job? Or even if something in the past, if it's a resource or anything like that, that you could think of that would be
Man,
helpful for people?
here's what I would say. The thing that has been most, I don't know that I can say that there are any leaders that I'm watching. This feels like pandemonium in our society. What
Yeah.
I would say is that the voices that I'm most encouraged by right now are the voices of calm spiritual reason during crisis.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
So when I listen to a guy like Tim Keller from City to City in New York City, things like that, I'm encouraged by calm voices during this crisis, and they're not on TV, and they're not on the news, and they're not in my Apple News feed. Generally, I'm encouraged by mature spiritual leaders that are pointing to reality rather than sensationalizing everything. So, but in terms of the business world, and I have coached quite a few really prominent and oftentimes nationally known business leaders, and everybody's scrambling right now to
yeah.
figure out what to do in this. And so, where's the Winston Churchill? I'm not sure. So maybe there's a lot of them out there, but I'm not sure right now.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, a lot of the people watching know that, yeah, I'm a pastor, but I'm also involved in the business world, particularly the restaurant industry. And right now, you look across that landscape, and there's so many different responses and how people are trying to survive and do stuff. And I think the one thing that I've seen from both worlds is the leaders that are communicating regularly and effectively, and like you said, in a calm way to their people.
Yeah,
Because even for me, not all my staff in my restaurant are working, because I
right.
can't employ them all, right? And so I have to swallow that and take that, but keep rolling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
is it is not easy, but yeah. What do you see coming down the pipeline? I'm just curious. I'm going off the cuff a little bit. I know I gave you notes, but I rarely follow them. So what do you think is coming down the pipeline for church leaders? What do they need to be thinking about right now? Because I know a lot of people who are watching are church leaders. What do they need to be preparing for right now?
Well, man, so we've got many voices in our society here. There are the voices that are, like Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. We could lose tens of thousands of more people. There are the voices out there that
Hmm.
that that feel like this whole thing has been dramatically overblown. Sometimes they seem to even be along partisan lines almost.
A little bit.
I find myself really probably in the middle there. I when I and look, I'm a futurist in terms of when you look at my strengths finder, you look at my profile, I'm constantly thinking future, where are we headed?
Hmm.
I feel convinced. I don't have any data to back this up other than just reading tons of stuff like many of you have. I feel convinced that we are in this crisis for a longer period of time than most people think, to some extent. Now, when I say a longer period of time and to some extent, I don't mean that we're all going to be in our homes forever. I just mean I think a lot of our normal is going to be upended for perhaps even 18 months. So I don't know, in terms of church leaders, it feels like it's going to be difficult for large churches to gather anytime soon. Now, man, I hope I'm wrong. So I'm not trying to be right. But when we look at churches of 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people, it's just really hard to conceive of people sitting 6 inches from each other,
Yeah.
shoulder to shoulder, after all of this. And even if the government says it's okay, psychologically, are people going to be ready for that? Are older folks going to be comfortable going back out into those contexts in 2020? So I could talk about this forever, but to summarize in the next 30 seconds or 45 seconds, here's what I would say. Your short-term plan in place. All right. Your short-term plan was like your emergency plan. Your midterm plan, starts maybe June 1st, maybe July 1st, depending on where you are, what state or country you're in, depending on when
Hmm.
your state reopens. And your midterm plan is like, what will rhythms look like for us as a church while we're still in this sort of social distancing phase, even though we're reopening society? And I think that's going to go quite a while. And look, like Cal State Fullerton, next to where I live, is not holding classes this fall on campus. They've canceled classes in 2020. More and
Man.
more universities are doing that. When you look at that, you go, isn't that kind of a sign for the church in terms of what big gatherings will look like? So I think you've got to be planning midterm. What
Hmm.
will be 6 to 9 months? And when I say that, the optimists don't like that But frankly, I think to be overly optimistic right now is to be a little naive, And then lastly, we need to be thinking about, 18 months from now or whenever this is completely over, God willing. Man, if you're convinced it's over in a month or two, I'm on your side. I hope you're right.
Yeah.
So, man, that's what we're all pulling for. I just feel like never hurts to prepare. And I think you got to be preparing by expecting we might be in this midterm a little longer. And then long term, man, be learning lessons. Be Crouch, 8% of businesses are essentially startups. 8% of businesses have to reconceive of their entire business. And he says, and that applies in many aspects to churches as well.
Man. Yeah. It's wild because we don't know what to expect or what's going to happen. Right. Like, so we just kind of have to roll with the punches a little bit here. And I'm probably with you. There's probably a little bit longer than any of us like or want. So,
we hope not. We hope not.
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's starting to get exhausting, right? Like people are just like, it's I haven't watched the news in weeks. I'm like, there's nothing here, I'm not down for it right now.
Probably best.
Yeah. So,
I hear you.
So just real quick, I'll give you one more question. Actually, I lied. I got two more for you, but one is leaders out here watching, wondering what to do. I want to talk about the home real quick. You're a husband and a father. What does it look like leading at home during this time? What would be some tips that you would have, or some just practical things that you would encourage on how to be a great leader at home? I think that's one that on a lot of leadership stuff gets ignored, but I didn't want to ignore that.
All right. I'll say two or three things. The first thing I'll say is make sure that you're caring for yourself, physically, spiritually. I've been trying to open the Bible in the morning every day before I ever look at anything else, which has been a pattern for me for a long time anyways, but more important now to be focused on making sure that I'm good, getting rest, and, all that sort of like, make sure you take good care of yourself. And I don't say that because you're most important. I'm just saying, care for yourself during this time. The second thing I would say is be a loving, caring, serving presence to your wife and kids, if you have a wife and kids. So you have to be present during this time. I've been really present with my family for 7 weeks. I mean, we have dinner every night together. We sit and talk for an hour or an hour and a half together after dinner every night, which hasn't happened in years because I have 2 kids away at college. The third thing I would say is be a spiritual presence in your home. I found opportunities in my home to shape my family spiritually more than ever. And then I think if I didn't already say this in number 2, be a calm, non-anxious presence in your home. So a non-anxious, calm presence. Craziness is going on everywhere. We don't need that at home. And so, man, I can honestly say 7 weeks into this, at home, things are peaceful and good and loving, and we're getting along well and doing well because of the intentionality there.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. It's fun. I've noticed there's like some new opportunities there. Like I have one where my son and I, every evening, like actually right before bed, usually has his pajamas on, we take our skateboards up to the top of the hill that we live on. And we made a fake like biohazard sign that we put on a cone and we block our roads. Our neighbors all did it. It's pretty hilarious, but welcome to Boulder. And my son and I just do a little skating session just down the road every night before bed. We could never do that before. Just finding some fun things to do like that. Last night, my neighbor's a hardcore Burning Man lady, like big time into it. She threw a social distance block party, everybody to stay in their yard, but she had like a laser light show, dance party. I'm like, dude, my kids, hopefully they remember this as a good time. That's all I'm trying to do. I just want them to have fun, as best I can.
That's good. So it's good.
It's fun.
Right on. I'll pray that you guys don't crash on those skateboards before you go to bed.
Yeah, so. It's gonna happen, but it'll be all right. Last question for you. I always like to end with something a little bit more fun, but my question is this, and I've gone out to some pretty epic meals with you. A lot of meat is usually consumed, like a Brazilian steakhouse, or what was the other place where that you cook it yourself that you took me to?
Korean barbecue. Yeah.
Korean barbecue. I thought I was going to die, but it would have been a happy death. So my question, because I have all these great food memories with you, is where are you eating first when you're comfortable, it's good, it's safe, you can go out. What's your top restaurant? Where are you going?
It's going to be sushi a mile from my house, on my favorite sushi spot. We're used to eating sushi and Thai food multiple times a week. And so, man, sushi and Thai food. So can't wait if it ever happens. So
Yeah.
God bring it back.
Yeah, right. I miss sushi too. It's sad. We don't have as good. I'm a landlocked state, but we get it
There
done
you
as best
go.
we can. Well,
Right
cool.
on.
Well, I've appreciate your time. You can hang on here for a minute, but hey, if you've been watching and you want to check out more, these are all available on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts. They're all there. My Instagram TV account as well. Coming up, a couple guests I've got locked in. I'm really excited about. I've got Jess Conley coming on. Awesome Christian women's author, speaker. I'm really excited that we've got her, and she's actually the speaker at our church's conference, Lord willing, later this year. Who knows if that's going to happen or not? We're hoping it does, but I've got her coming on. I've got Steve Snyder from Fellowship Associates as well. And I'm working on a couple of, I can't name them yet, but a few chefs that you may actually know and have heard of from famous TV shows and things like that. So some fun guests coming in. So stay tuned. But yeah, Brian, it's been awesome having you. Really appreciate the time, and it's been super helpful. So for all you watching, thanks for taking time, and hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks. We will talk to you all.